This is You've Already Been Hacked, recorded on Okay, this week we're back after grading papers and midterms and all sorts of fun in the classroom. Just a few weeks left in the term, so we're going to try to get back to being a little more regular, on schedule with the podcast. Apologies to all of my listeners. This week I was perplexed in trying to figure out, did I want to go and look at some of the news, because there were some interesting things in the news, some insider threats, a couple vulnerabilities, basically everything we see week to week, or something else. And I'm still going to divert to the something else this week. And what we're going to talk about this week is something that a lot of cybersecurity professionals do. I would dare say in their own hobby space, but also for those that are starting out in cybersecurity or interested in cybersecurity, something you can do at home, relatively, for 2021, inexpensive, and that is setting up a home lab or something akin to a home lab. So, for those that don't know what that means, what is a home lab? Well, a home lab is basically set up a configuration of devices that you would use to test out things in a safe, clean, quote-unquote, environment. You would have your own, potentially your own routers, your own switches, servers, desktops, all the things that you could encounter out in the real world in a corporate infrastructure. Well, geez, Professor, that sounds expensive. Why would I want to waste my money doing that? I don't have enough as it is already, which is why I'm trying to get into cybersecurity. This is a good point. I am in the process of setting up my own home lab. Bits and pieces here and there. It's not ready yet. And it is on the majority built on old hardware. This is how I've been able to do it in a relatively inexpensive way, although if you take what I may have paid for these devices when they were retail and new, probably not. And the professor's wife, Mrs. Cyber she probably would not approve if she knew the exact cost of all the items. But such is life in the technosphere. Anyway, another way, that you can develop your home lab for, again, relatively inexpensive, although given the silicon shortage of the past year, 18 months, prices have gone up, is using Raspberry Pis or single board computers. I default to the Raspberry Pi as it tends to be something that is widely commercially available and widely supported by multiple different operating systems. And it comes in a variety of different sizes and configurations, and there are now 4 generations of these devices that have different parts and power and whatnot, right? I'm going to have somewhere around, I have 8 or 9 Raspberry Pis right now. And they will all be serving different functions within my home lab. Now, I also have a couple of older iMacs that I've been able to acquire. I have an old 2008 Mac Pro, which I continuously revamp and keep as up-to-date as I possibly can. And yes, it is still very usable here in 2021. Not my primary computer by any stretch of the imagination, just a tinkerbox. So I'm going to get all of this stuff together into a configuration. I have some old 1 gigabit network switches, little consumer ones, right? We're not talking about the big stuff you'd find in enterprise. I'm talking about like Netgears or Linksys's, but stuff that is more than adequate to form an independent network. And all of this is something that you would want to segregate from your primary home network. You do not want this stuff touching the rest of your network if you're going to do testing and all sorts of other interesting things on it that you would otherwise not want to expose a device to. That's the idea of a home lab. So what are you going to do with all of this? How are we going to accomplish doing anything on a home lab to test out our cybersecurity abilities or to learn new skills or things like that? Well, if we delete any infrastructure that could have had significant costs, the Macs, any PCs, let's just stick with the Raspberry Pis, right? You can get a Raspberry Pi today, full kit, up off the ground with an SD card in it for $55, maybe $45 if you look really look around the internet. The kit would include a case, the SD card with an operating system on it, or one that you could flash, and we'll get to that in a minute. The power cable, probably an HDMI cable. All you'd have to do is bring your own monitor, keyboard, and mouse. And for one of the Raspberry Pis out there, which is just about $100, it's called the Raspberry Pi 400. It is an entire Raspberry Pi built into a keyboard and comes with an external mouse. All you have to do is provide the monitor. So let's say you have one of these. Okay, well, I, professor, need to learn Linux now. Yes, that's part of having a home lab, is to have a learning environment. Do you want to learn Linux to do cybersecurity stuff just on the default Raspbian OS, which is Raspberry Pi's operating system provided by the Raspberry Pi Foundation? You could, although the default standard for penetration testing, for cybersecurity, for all the things, I would say, in my opinion, is Kali Linux. Now, what is Kali Linux? Well, Kali Linux is a penetration testing environment, is the best way I can describe it. It's open sourced. It's based on the Debian Linux distribution, and it has a wide variety of information security tools and software for penetration testing, security research, computer forensics, and reverse engineering. If you want to learn how to do something in the world of cybersecurity, Kali Linux as an operating system and all of the software that comes with it is the platform to start with. Again, in a safe environment. Do not attempt to do this to your home network, or you could damage something and you could irrevocably ruin your systems. I would not do this out on the open internet, and I would not do this at your local Starbucks. You don't want the type of heat that would come from doing this type of research on other people's systems. That's actually hacking, and that's not good. So when using Kali, do you need to use a Raspberry Pi? No, but in my instance, I'm going to, because it'll be a dedicated piece of hardware that I think is more than powerful enough for the types of things I'm going to do. However, if you don't want to invest in any hardware, you could always do virtual machines. Any platform of virtual machine would work. You know, if you're on Mac, you have Parallels, you have VMware, you have VirtualBox. On Windows, you have some of the same things. You could install this in a virtual machine. In Windows, they even have a variant now that is part of the Windows subsystem for Linux. You could just install that out of the Microsoft Store and have yourself a day, right? You'd have all the tools at your disposal. Kali also has a app now in the App Store for Android. I doubt this would ever be on iOS. But it's called Kali Net Hunter. So if your primary device, or the device you are willing to sacrifice for educational purposes, and you could probably get one for relatively cheap, is an Android-based device, tablet or phone, you can get Kali Net Hunter and install that there and use that as your offensive security or defensive security platform, whatever you're going to use it for. Kali is, again, based on Debian, so it is Linux, which means there's ultimate numbers of configurations involved. You're going to have to figure out what looks right to you. There's all these interfaces. Learning Linux is not a simple task, but once you have it set up, there is so much that you can do in Kali that it is, dare I say, frightening. Now, I've known about Kali Linux for a long time. So this is not Professor's first dive into it, but first dive into home labbing and really pushing my knowledge level on a whole bunch of different things. So just some of the stuff that's in Kali, for those in the cybersecurity community, the Metasploit framework is there. We all know what that is. That is open source exploits that already exist on the internet that have been collected into a suite that you can use. There are password crackers. There are network mapping tools. There are packet sniffers. If there's something you want to do, if there's something you want to learn, Kali has it. And by has it, I mean, if you look at their website, and I believe the specific address would be excuse me, kali.org/tools, you can literally look at every single tool that exists in the Kali Linux distribution. I don't know. If I decided to scroll it without just hitting the scroll wheel and letting it just spin, because I have one of those, it would take about a minute probably to scroll all the way down for all the tools it has. If you want it, it's there for you to test. Level of documentation per tool was maybe not so good, but that's going to be mileage will vary on each thing. And there is, like I said, there's everything. So this is going to be a great platform to do your testing with. Again, the reason to set up a Homelab, if you're going to use Kali Linux, is to have a base of devices that you are willing to sacrifice to your education. That's the primary thing. And they're segregated devices. That's the important part here. You can do this with virtual machines on your primary computing box. I know many people that do and have wonderful success doing it. However, if you are just starting out, if this is something you want to tinker with, if this is something that you do not want to lose what we call your mission critical platform. If you're a student and this is your laptop that we're talking about that you're getting through school with, maybe not do all of this right there, right now, especially if you're in the middle of classes. Foot stomp to my students. We still have weeks to go. Please don't break your computers. And by using Raspberry Pis, your investment, while still an investment, is nominal. If you had one Pi set up to be your Kali Linux box and a couple other Pis to be the boxes you would be going after, if something really horrific was to happen, let's just say software horrific on the SD card, right? You don't burn the SD card's still usable. That's a relatively quick re-imaging that you need to do and you're back in business, right? No harm, no fuss. If you were to do something to, at a hardware level, short circuit something if possible, brick it, we're talking that you are out of nominally somewhere between $50 and $100. Not happy, not great. And that's US dollars. Everyone else, if you're listening somewhere else, please do your conversion. But not happy, not great, not saying, yeah, you just go burn $100. But it's still better that you burned $100 while trying to teach yourself something than it is, say, burning a $2,000 laptop. That would be horrifically bad, right? Another reason why I'm building my Homelab on used or older hardware is this is stuff that's been sitting around in my house or in my garage. That's just been kind of collecting dust. At least now it'll be put back into good use, and it'll just keep my skills sharp again. So, why did I waste today's podcast on talking about what I'm doing with a Homelab or with Kali Linux at just a high level? This is just a primer. I intend to make this something that we'll talk about again as I develop this out and build more. Over on the YouTube channel, I may even do some videos along with the voiceover. That way you can see some of this stuff in action as we do it. If you have any questions or anything you're interested in, or, hey, Professor, could you try this out and let us know what you think? Leave some comments for me. Ask some questions. I would be happy to do that and investigate in and tell you what my experience is, especially if it's something that I haven't used before. That's all for this week. I'm your Professor of Cyber Risk, and we'll talk again soon. If you like this podcast, share it with your colleagues and friends. Your support is how we are able to continue to make this content. Thank you.